Hey everyone, welcome to IQ3 Connect's first LinkedIn Live event. I'm Colin Bloor, responsible for product and customer success. Thank you all for joining us. So today, we're going to show you how quick and easy it can be to create, immersive 3D training. I think this technology has got a bit of a bad reputation as being expensive or time consuming to create. And so, not necessarily worth the investment for many use cases. And hopefully, with what you'll see today, that will, dispel you of those assumptions. I'm not going to talk too much about IQ3 Connect, who we are, what we do. I kind of want to jump right into it. But it is important to note that IQ3 Connect is entirely web based. From creating the content to deploying it, viewing it, accessing it, it's all done through a web browser. Now, whether that's, done on a organization's network behind their firewall or in the cloud is irrelevant to us. Everything is accessed through a web browser. So you can really use this, create, deploy, and access it on any AR, VR, PC, tablet, or mobile device. And so with that out of the way, let's get started. Now I'm going to hide my camera here so we can focus on the content. And the first thing I want to show is a video of the finished product. So you get a reference for what we're going to create today. Now, this EV maintenance procedure was created in less than a day by our team. Um, and we're going to show you how to create some of the steps that you're going to see here. Now, this particular training has some interactive UI elements for like protective equipment selection, tool selection. We're not going to get into that. We're going to cover the fundamentals of the step-by-step workflow. So the animations that you're seeing, the visual cues like the flashing, the text instruction, the interactivity. Those are some of the things we're going to build, and we're going to build steps 1 through 4 of this procedure here. Now, in this training, we've also built in some logic. So as you can see, if you don't have the proper tool selected, you won't be able to complete the step, and that's all tracked, and you can report scores and metrics and all of that. And we've built this training with a UI that should be familiar to anybody, regardless of their level of involvement with XR, and that's done intentionally to make sure that the end user isn't worried about how do I grab virtual tools. It's more about teaching them the content in an engaging, immersive way without them having to worry about, how do I actually interact with the experience itself. And as I mentioned, I'll pause the video here and then we'll jump into it. You can keep track of, scores and metrics and pass that to a learning management system. And we'll be covering that in our next LinkedIn Live event. But everything you do in the environment can be tracked and can be passed into an LMS. So with that, let's start building this experience. Now, this is the IQ3 Connect project dashboard. Like I said, everything is done through a web browser. I'm using Google Chrome here. I'm going to start from the beginning, assuming you don't have any, haven't prepped or uploaded any sort of content yet. So we're going to start with uploading some 3D models and other assets that we might need. So this is going to start out with your 3D content. What model are you using? Now we're using some equipment that we found online on like Turbo Squid or CG Trader. But if your organization has this 3D data, that can be uploaded as well. And so we'll just upload this data and then we're going to process this. And all we're doing is just optimizing it for the web visualization and make sure it's compatible with any device. Now, you don't need to do any sort of manual optimization here. We can take the data as is, and we're just going to run it through our optimization automatically. So this is going to start what we call our model generation. So you don't have to worry about what data you're bringing in. We're going to handle all of that optimization for you. Now, you can bring in other sorts of assets as well. So, images, audio files, videos, documents, 360 videos and images, background environments, custom avatars. So all of that can be uploaded. For this demo today, I'll just upload an image that we'll use as like a splash screen. Now you can create your own splash screens in IQ3, but to give you the most flexibility and customization, you can create things in PowerPoint or Photoshop or Illustrator, create an image from that and then use that as your splash screen in IQ3. And perfect timing because our model just finished processing, so it took about 40 seconds. That's how quick the optimization is. And now that model is ready to be used. It's in our XR models here. So these are all the models that are ready to go. And now we can start building our training. So I'm going to go into my trainings tab and I'm going to create our first training here. And so this is going to pull up our training creator. So front and center is a 3D workspace in preview. So this is what's going to allow you to build your scene, to manipulate your 3D model and other assets, as well as preview the training itself so you can see what the end user will see. And then on the left here, we have kind of the fundamental building blocks of a training. The first are going to be those resources, those assets that we just talked about. So let's bring in one of the models we just uploaded. I'm going to bring in some viewpoints that came along with the model. So if you have viewpoints with the model, you can bring those in instead of like trying to recreate them. And viewpoints are just camera positions. Where is the user going to be or stand? As well as let's bring in that image file that we're going to use as a splash screen. So now that we've brought in our resources, the second kind of big building block of IQ3 or of a training is steps. Step one, step two, step three. What is the user going to do? And in our instance, let's create a first step, which will be just the splash screen. So they get an introduction. So I'm going to create that step. I'm going to double click on my image here to load it into the 3D space. And now I can scale it, I can move it, I can position it, any way I need to, get the look and feel I want. Now, if this were a PDF document I brought in, I might leave these controls so the user can navigate through the pages at their own pace. But since this is just a static image, let's just hide those controls. We don't need them, and we'll save this step. This step is now done. So let's add our second step, which is going to be, as you recall from the video, it's going to be to open the driver door. So that's going to be the first step in our sequence. And we'll get rid of the splash screen and add the model to the workspace. I'm just going to double click on it. It'll load in the workspace for us. And during this step is where you can kind of customize the scene, the environment. So where do you want your model? Where do you want your camera or your viewpoint to be? So let's kind of come over to the driver's side here. Let's open up the tools that we have available to manipulate the model. One of the tools we have is move and rotate, and I want to move the whole model. So let's grab the whole model, kind of move it down to the floor here. I won't add in the garage or anything that you saw in the video, but you can add multiple 3D models in here to create your custom 3D environment. Now I can position the camera manually, but as I said, I brought in some viewpoints already that came with the model. So I'll just double click on one of those viewpoints and it'll take us to where I want. And we can save this step. And now we can start to add some more dynamic, animations and interactions here. So, for example, with this step, the driver's door is flashing to give the user an indication that this is what they need to interact with. So let's add that flashing action. So I'm just going to add an action called flash. I want it to highlight flash, and I'm just going to select the volume that I want to apply that to, in this case, the door. And now we are done with this step, and we can move on to the second step, which is opening the frunk with the button. So let's add our next step. And I'm going to do things dynamically this time. So I'm just going to save this step as is. So this is going to be the start of the step, and I'm going to do everything dynamically with animations. So I'm going to add an action, a movement action. Now, when I click Start Selection, so I can start selecting from the object, it gives you a notice, hey, select a branch from the model tree. If you have no idea what the model tree is or the hierarchy of the model, it really doesn't matter. We have a tool called Find in Tree that you can turn on. You just click on the object you want to move, and it's going to select that for you. And now if that's not enough, like this is just the door outer, we want the whole door to move, I could work my way up in the hierarchy to select the entire thing, for example. And now I just click move and rotate, and I can move this as a solid object, all these different individual volumes as a solid object, and rotate that as well. Now, I don't want to necessarily rotate it around from its center point, so let's reset that, just Control Z as with any undo tool. And I'm just going to kind of modify my control to rotate around the point that I define. And it doesn't need to be exact, close enough for this training. So I select that, I make my movement, confirm it, and there we go. I've just built in this animation. And now, I want the camera to zoom into the driver's side here. So let's add an action for loading a viewpoint. I'm going to start that at about 3 seconds because I want the door to open. As you recall, that animation is 2 seconds long. So maybe I'll zoom in the viewpoint at 3 seconds. And I'm going to load up the viewpoint for the front button, which is this one here. Just double click on that. That'll load us into the workspace here. So now that that is in place, I'm going to add one more action so that we can flash the front button. So again, just choosing the flash action, and then I select my object from the workspace, and I'm done with that step. And maybe I'll start this at like 4 seconds, give time for the viewpoint to load, then we'll flash the object afterwards. And it doesn't matter when you really do these actions, that is entirely up to you. Determines kind of the look and feel of the training you want. But let's add another step here. This time we're going to remove the battery cover. And let's do things, statically this time, kind of jump over to this viewpoint. Instead of doing an action to load something, let's just kind of jump to this view automatically. So I'm going to move the camera over. I'm going to save it. And now I can start adding my dynamic actions. So again, we're going to do a move feature here. Use my find and tree tool to select the hood as an entire object. And then again, I'm going to come modify my tool so that I'm rotating around a single point. And we'll just lift that up a bit and confirm. So there's our next animation. And then, we'll kind of repeat what we've done a little bit. So we're going to load a viewpoint. This time the viewpoint is going to be to the front. Start that at 3 seconds. And so this is the view we're going to load just so we can kind of follow along with the process. And then very similar, I am going to add a flash action, highlighting so that we're flashing this object here. And again, we'll start that at 4 seconds. And you can copy and paste entire timelines or steps, sorry. So if you've, using the same actions over and over again, you can just copy and move all of this stuff from one to the next so that you don't have to kind of redo all of this. That's another automation feature, which we'll show next time. So now that that's done here, we can, actually preview the step. And now let's add our final step here. And that's going to be disconnect the connection on the negative terminal of the battery. So you can see you could go from preview mode to authoring mode very, very quickly. So we're just going to save this as is. We're going to add an action here to move. Let's move this volume out. And let's do that over 1 second to make this a bit quicker. Again, just choose my part, move it, and I'm done. And then let's, hide that part. So I'm going to go to selection, and I'm going to make that part invisible after it moves. So I'll start that at 2 seconds, make that disappear, and then let's load in the viewpoint so that we can go see the battery. We'll start that at 4 seconds, or 3 seconds maybe. And this is the battery view that we're going to get. And then the last action we can add is to do the flashing of the nut on the battery. So if you misclick, like I did right there, you can easily just remove that selection, and there you go. Now I'm only selecting the nut. And this is our training. And again, I can start this maybe at like 4 seconds, for example. And we can preview it from here. So this will stop the authoring process, enter into preview mode. Experience loads. There's our splash screen. We get some default titles and text, which I'll show you how to edit, but you automatically get kind of next back buttons to navigate through the training here. And now if I step through this, you can see the door opens. We then zoom into the front button. The front button flashes. I click next and the front opens. And then we're going to zoom in and continue that process. So I can stop that here because I'm running a little short on time. And I just want to show you how to build in some of that interactivity. So let's add some interactivity into step 1 here, where I'm opening the driver door. Now, instead of just using the next button, let's let the user click on the door or grab the door, interact with the door. So I'm just going to add in what we call a trigger event, a volume select action. And so all I have to do is I select this volume here, and I define where I'm going to go. In this case, I'm going to go to the next step, which is step 2. And so here I can preview this training now so we can see what this looks like. So there's our intro. I move on to the next step. And instead of clicking the next or back button, I can now interact with the door itself to move on to the next step. And finally, you see this default title, default text, that's all editable, either, directly in the step. So for example, I can click on a step, I click edit, and that'll allow me to change the title and the text. Or we actually have a tabular view, a text table that allows you to very rapidly change the text description for any step in the training. And so the last thing I want to show is the publish feature. So how do you deploy this? I'm in edit mode right now. How do I send this out? So we have a publish button up here. I'm just going to publish this, call it demo published, fine. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a URL link to this training. And I'm going to send that out in the LinkedIn comments in just a second here. So that's really how you can, build and now deploy this, and you'll actually be able to experience this. I'm going to post it to LinkedIn comments in just a moment. You'll be able to see this exact training we created. And so that's kind of it for our LinkedIn Live event. I hope this was useful for everybody. If you have any questions, you want to, talk to us about your use case, have a more detailed demo so we can show you some of the logic, the UI, stuff like that. Please feel free to go to iq3connect.com/request a meeting. I'll send this link in the LinkedIn chat as well, so that you have this. But I appreciate everybody joining us today, and look forward to our next one. Thank you.